Okay, I think it's long past time that we have this respective discussion in this video. I've been stewing about it for quite a long time, had it in the works, but I think some revelations and certain things that have been happening in the bookish community and conversations that have been happening in the bookish community have prompted me to say, okay, we need to put our foot down on this respective topic because it is getting out of hand, way out of hand. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a bookish discussion. I think I'm gonna, it's not so much that I'm breaking my silence on this issue, it's more like I've been stewing over it, trying to think about what I want to say about it, and trying to come up with concrete examples in terms of the things that I want to say and mean when discussing it. We need to talk about the current trend of discreet and illustrated covers with respect to the bookish community, because I think to this point, on some levels, it's not that I want to paint a broad brush on this particular topic, but rather I'm going to illustrate in terms of things that where it's creating significant issues in the community, and as well as kind of actually doing harm more than good at this point. I can't even express in terms of how much this gets under my skin in terms of what I've seen in terms of the trends that are popping up, and probably not for the reason that you absolutely think. So we're going to get into a longish discussion on the trend of illustrated book covers, discrete book covers, what I think about it, kind of talking about the what goes into the work of creating a cover and what is involved in terms of the marketing aspects of creating a book cover and that kind of thing, and kind of even touching base on some of the insidious parts of why I think this cover trend is actually gaining steam, and it's not in the best interest of authors long term in terms of things. And yeah, so without further ado, let's go ahead and begin, and let's just go full steam ahead. So first things first, I want to put a disclaimer on this particular video, just general disclaimer in terms of things. This is not going to be the only conversation that I have on this topic on the channel. It may be a multi-video type string of conversations as I look through the community and as topics come up in my mind. So just don't think that this is the end-all be-all video on this topic. And I have a nuanced perspective when it comes to book covers and bookmarking. And as someone who is an aspiring author myself, this is important to me. And I think about it both from the authorial perspective as well as being a bookish consumer, and a long-time bookish consumer. I've been a bookish consumer for far longer than I've been a writer. And I think about in terms of what, in terms of the different communities and the different genres and different things, I look at each in terms of how the marketability, in terms of what appeals to me and what's important to me as a book consumer, as a book buyer in general. And I think about what goes into the creation of a cover. And I know there are a lot of people who say, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover in terms of the colloquialism. But I think when we're talking about book marketing and we're talking about people, what influences the factors that cause people to pick up a book, I think the covers really play a key role. And whether that's through digital marketing as well as physical book marketing as well, I think that plays a role and it has a significant impact. But to the disclaimer, what is going to be involved in this video, it is not the end-all be-all on this topic. I'm going to try to do as nuanced of a conversation about this, because I don't think when it comes to illustrated discrete covers, I am not wholesale against the idea of having discrete or illustrated covers. But I want to point out, considering the current trends of what I'm seeing in the bookish community, considering what I'm seeing in terms of specific genres that are being impacted by these changes, and also in terms of what it says to larger, like the trend of like changes within bookish marketing and how that affects authors and consumers and things like that. I want to be able to have a wholesale discussion on how this is. Your mileage may vary. You may disagree with a lot of what I say in this video, but I do want to be able to at least put it out there in terms of these are things to think about. These are things that are actual real conversations that are going on in the community, and also being able to say, hey, some of these trends just don't seem to make sense and seems to be a disconnect between the consumer and the marketing that is going on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start off this conversation in terms of what makes a good book cover, in my opinion. So I kind of like titled this "The Anatomy of a Book Cover" for this particular section. So like you may ask me in a general question, Rose, what makes a good book cover for you as a bookish consumer? And you may also ask me of it in terms of like, you know, what it means for like a good marketing, and some of that tends like kind of crosses over with some of the same things, but I'm going to highlight 4 different aspects of what makes an anatomy of a good book cover to me. And so the first one that I want to highlight is the style of a cover. So if you're thinking about stylistically what goes into a good book cover, is it conveying the style of that particular genre or theme, or the contents of the book that is being created? So I want to look at being able to see if there's a match between the style of the cover matching what is contained within the book. So I look for that when it comes to having a good cover, whether it may be a certain type of and you may see me like kind of cross some of these with respect to like how they intertwine with each other, but stylistic is really important to me in terms of how the cover conveys what the genre is, and the type of writing and the type of style that the author has in their writing. So if you have something that's a romantic comedy, does it have comedic elements? If you have something that's a military grade sci-fi, do you have the seriousness of the style and tone in that cover in terms of what you want to communicate? Style is definitely important with respect to a good book cover. Another one is tone, and this is the tone of your cover matching what's contained inside of a book. If you have a book that conveys a serious topic, like someone undergoing a cancer battle, you don't want to have a mismatched tone with the outside of the book, thinking that it's cutesy or something like that. It's not gonna sell well with respect to people who are expecting one thing and then get out of it another. I talked about an example of this being Me Before You, where that is not a romance book. It's actually just contemporary fiction, and a lot of people think it goes into it thinking that it's a romance when it's not, especially with respect to the ending in terms of things. And like a lot of people will argue that part by Jojo Moyes and like try to label that as a contemporary romance, when really it doesn't fit the conventional definitions of romance based on the content that is within the book. So that's one example in terms of you don't want to have a mismatched tone with respect to the book that you're writing, because then that can turn off potential readers and people from picking up your work if that tone does not match. Another one that I think is really important with respect to a book is symbolism, which may not necessarily jump out with certain readers. If you have a book that has different aspects to it with respect to the style and the tone, does the symbolism that is contained in the cover match the overarching themes and the overarching content of your book? You may have things that are more overt, or you may have things that are more subtle, that if a person is picking up your book and reads the book in terms of stuff, it evokes that symbolism in terms of what's contained in the book, and give them a reason to be able to hold on to it more, because you have that symbolism that matches what is in the book and what's identifying per a character or an event or something that's contained within the body of your work. So that gives it a little bit more of an intimate perspective. And then lastly, the aesthetic. Is this aesthetic matching? And this all pertains to the previous three themes that I listed in the anatomy of a book cover. Does it match the audience that you're trying to market to? And that is really, really important in terms of things, because it is different for different audiences, and you don't want to have any ambiguity when it comes to marketing to your specific aesthetic to a certain audience. And I talk about this at extensive length when it comes to the difference between adult fiction and YA and middle grade and children's, because it's all different in terms of the aesthetic. So that is very, very important when it comes to the anatomy of a book cover. So now you may be wondering, what are some examples of good book covers that cover all four of the aesthetics that I talked about in the previous section of this video? So I'll give you some examples from multiple genres to give you an idea of what I mean. So first one I want to highlight is one of my favorite books of the previous year, 2 years, I think now in terms of things. So Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is the cover up for your reference. I think this is a beautiful cover that conveys exactly what it markets in terms of things. You see the characters highlighted here. It's gorgeously illustrated. The lettering is pleasing aesthetically. This works very well in terms of the audience that it's illustrated from. You get the sense that this is a cozy fantasy. You see the tone of it, where it just feels really relaxed and really like inviting you in terms of being able to get to know these respective characters. That it communicates its audience very well. This is an adult fantasy, and it kind of makes sense in terms of how it is marketed. And then just the overall piece of this that actually like brings it together really well is and also with respect to this, the symbolism of this is really apparent in terms of knowing that you see the characters and that they're running a coffee shop, and making sure everything that kind of like comes together in this. So you have the symbolism, you have the tone, you have the aesthetic, and you have all of the collective style of this, like communicating what it wants to communicate. So this is an example of a very strong cover that communicates exactly what you expect to get out of this book. And it does a great job of being able to do it. Another example of a good book cover that I think communicates what it wants to communicate with respect to all four of these aspects is Queen Move by Kennedy Ryan. Now, this is an adult romance in terms of things. You can see by the cover of this, in terms of the stylistic, it matches the fact that this is a romance. The tone of it in terms of being a very mature, very sexy type of book. Even with the title Queen Move, you can tell from the imagery of the two cover models here, and especially with the way that the female character model is looking at you. It's like, this is a boss move, this is a queen move. Like, you know exactly what you're getting into when it comes to like picking up this book. The tone of it, the style, the aesthetic, and as well as the symbolism in terms of like where it matches the cover image as well as the title. And you can tell that this is an adult romance. I love the aesthetic, the cover, the tone, every part of this respective cover, and I think it does a really good job of selling you in terms of what to expect from this book. Another book that I think does a really good job of marketing its content with respect to the cover is this YA Contemporary. This is With or Without You by Eric Smith, and this is the cover up for your reference. This is a library copy. So something that I really like about this is that it communicates to you in terms of like the tone of it being a lighthearted, insinuated like a romance between these two characters, and even just talking about some of the way of like the cozy type of vibes that's kind of communicated between these two characters. It invites you in terms of wanting to know more about these two characters and what their relationship entails. And I love the fact that it's bright and colorful, which kind of communicates the audience that it's being marketed to. I love the style, the tone, the aesthetic of this is pleasing to look at, and the symbolism in terms of like what it communicates between the relationship of the two characters on this cover. So this is very this is a very good example of how the cover is designed very well to suit its respective audience. Just to name another example. So now that you know exactly what I'm looking at in terms of the different aspects of what go into a great cover, and in terms of the marketing of a great cover, now we're going to get into the heart of why I'm making this video, because I'm seeing a trend in terms of the bookish industry, and it's been going on for several years now. Like I want to say that Kelly Jensen of Book Riot had written an article about this, I think back in 2019. I will kind of like put an image of the article up for your reference and link to the article in the description box below for your reference to cite it. But back in 2019, Kelly Jensen had talked about the cover trends of illustrated covers being marketed as a part of adult romance, and how that has been a concerning trend in terms of the marketability of it in terms of things. And I see it now in 2024 where it's gotten to the point where it's gotten worse and in a negatively impactful way. And I'm going to tell you the reason why in this respective video, because we're getting to the point where it is virtually impossible to be able to distinguish between age groups as well as tone with respect to the content of several books, specifically in the romance community, for marketability in terms of things. And I see this becoming like it's already kind of like that bubbling under the surface issue, but I think it has the potential to get even worse than what it is right now. And the one thing that you don't want to do is market a book that is not intended for a specific community, like say like YA. You don't want to conflate communities when it comes to the design and marketability of a book in terms of things. When it gets to the point where they're virtually indistinguishable, that's a problem. You know, for younger audiences in terms of stuff, this ambiguity has also a problem in terms of being able to communicate with like across genres and across communities. So I feel like we need to have this discussion, and it's also infuriating as a book buyer for talking about this, because it's indistinguishable in terms of being able to actually pick up a book that's say romance, adult romance, and you're thinking it's a rom-com, but when in actuality conveys a much heavier subject matter, or even a more or even a traumatic subject matter in terms of things. And for many people in the community, it can get to the point where it's it can turn off potential readers and buyers, because it's like the cover is telling me one thing, but the actual content of the book is telling me another. I don't know if I can trust this particular book or story because of what the cover conveys in terms of things. So there's a mismatch between the tones of a lot of covers, specifically within the adult romance community, to what's in the content of a book. And there are several examples I can name that indicate this mismatch. And it's not even just with respect to newer books, it's repackaging older books that have a specific tone and kind of rebranding them into a tone that they do not convey. So let's go into some of the examples of that mismatch for tone and style and the other aspects that convey this. I'm going to first start off with the covers for this specific series that inspired this particular video to start with. And I mentioned this respective series in one of my previous videos when I was talking about the cover changes, which I was doing a book haul, and I had talked about some of the cover changes with respect to this respective series. So this was what inspired me to kind of actually have the momentum to be able to create this video. So Christina Lauren is a very popular duo in the romance community, of several different books. In terms of things, I would not consider myself a Christina Lauren fan. Like, I read Beautiful Bastard many years ago, and it just was not my cup of tea. But I recognize the impact that they have in the contemporary romance, adult romance community in terms of things. So when I saw the redesign of the Wild Seasons series, which starts with Sweet Filthy Boy. These are the original covers, up for your reference, of this respective series. And then this is the redesign of this respective series. And I look at this very specifically to try to kind of understand why this change was done. Because at first I thought these were placeholder covers for this respective series, that they wanted to redesign it and kind of give it a new facelift in terms of stuff. But then people were saying in the community, these are the actual redesigned covers. And I'm like, what in the world did they do to this series in terms of things? Because if you look at the original covers for this respective series, it communicates to you in terms of the tone and style and what you're getting out of it, that they're romance books. You see the different illustrations of the cover models on there, the specific type of lettering, and the tone that each of the original covers give for this. Even the text for Sweet Filthy Boy in terms of how it's done alongside the image as well as coloring, and it gives a specific tone, style, aesthetic, and symbolism to it, to bring those elements together and be able to say, this is what you're getting out of this book, and this is an adult romance, and this is the hero and everything else. But when you look at the redesigned covers, I'm like, it's very generic. It almost kind of has this weird sense of kind of trying to laugh at an inside joke, in terms of the lettering for Sweet Filthy Boy, where it has sweet and then filthy and this kind of distinctive lettering, and then boy, and then this really bright cover that tells you nothing about the book. And it's like, what went into the thought of redesigning the covers like that? It's so generic to the point where it's like, would anyone really pick up this book if they didn't already know what it was about? I know I wouldn't. I know I personally wouldn't, because this feels like it's devoid of any kind of personality. It's like, if you're marketing an adult romance, you're not, the way that these covers screen to me, that it seems like it's gratuitous Gatorade. It does not tell me that these are romances. It feels like there's nothing that's really standing out in terms of what the book entails. Like it seems like it wants to be aesthetically pleasing and with the bright covers and eye-catching, but it does nothing to tell me what the book is about, and it does nothing to, it's very, very generic. And so I thought, okay, I need to make a video about this because I don't understand what's going into the decisions behind these redesigns that are turning them into very generic versions of what they used to be. Another example of this is Sylvia Day's Crossfire series. So this is the series that starts with Bared to You. These are the original covers as an example for your reference for the Bared to You series. So there's Bared to You, Reflected in You, etc. And what you can glean from this is that this is an erotic romance series. Very mature, very much adult. You can see the dark color schemes of each of the covers in terms of what they convey. And even the objects that are on each of the covers in terms of stuff give this personality to it, where it's like, you know, this is mature, this is sexy, this is a display of wealth, this is a display of status and wealth, and kind of like this maturity and this elegance and this kind of idealized perspective, but yet the dark color scheme indicates that this is going to be a bit dark in terms of stuff. So you see all of that reflected in these respective covers in terms of what it conveys. And then you get to the redesigned covers and you see this. I ask very honestly, what is this redesign supposed to convey? Because even with the marble covers, I can understand that's kind of like a symbolism of wealth and privilege and status. I get that they maintain the color scheme of each of the books to coincide with the old cover scheme, but what does this tell you about it being erotica? What does this tell you about the books themselves in terms of what the content is in? And you don't get that from the redesigned covers. You get that from the original covers here, but you don't get them from the redesigned covers. So I don't know what went into the design of that to make it like that, other than to be aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't tell me as a book consumer that this is something that like a bookish like people who are unfamiliar with the series would be able to pick up, because it doesn't tell you anything in terms of, it says like Bared to You, Reflected to You, but it's the same generic cover. It doesn't tell you in terms of that symbolism or have that evocative sense of things what it's supposed to convey. And so if you're from the outside looking in, you're not getting that specific sense of personality and expression from these redesigned covers. And so that's another example. And then we get to one of the most egregious examples of a redesign cover of a series, which I only learned about this when I was trying to do the filming of this book, and I learned about it this morning as of the time that I'm filming this video. J.C. Burton's play-by-play series is a very popular sports romance in the adult fiction, adult romance community. These are the examples of the original covers for your reference of the play-by-play series. And I've read a few of these titles in this respective series. So I know the content of what it is. Very distinctive, very steamy, very mature. No ambiguity whatsoever in terms of what the content is contained in these respective covers. Now I want y'all to look at the redesigned cover for The Perfect Play. What is this supposed to entail? What is this supposed to entail? Because when I look at this illustrated cover for this, it gives me ambiguity in terms of who it's marketed towards. It does not convey the maturity of what is contained in these books. It does not give me the idea of who this book is for. When you look at it, and see that it looks like a rom-com intended for a younger audience in terms of things, and that it's not like it doesn't convey the content of the book. And I asked myself, like, what was the intention behind redesigning the covers like this? Because it feels like it's lying to the consumer in terms of things. And also, not only that, in terms of like for the community that it's intended for, if you don't know what this book entails in terms of the content as well as the tone and everything else, you're gonna think going into this book that it's one thing, and coming out with it with another thing, and you'll feel that you're lied to because it doesn't match. It's a tonal mismatch from what the play-by-play series has. And I actually enjoy the play-by-play series. I want to be able to actually restart reading the series from the beginning and read it through to the end. But I saw this on Twitter and I just shook my head. I'm like, what in the world are y'all thinking? What in the world are y'all thinking in terms of like changing it to this? And not only that, like the artwork itself is so generic and bland, and like it may convey a little bit in terms of what the characters look like, but it feels generic and juvenile, to be honest with you. And I don't understand in terms of what went into the decision to design these covers this way, other than following a supposed trend. And that's going to create a lot of problems later on in terms of things, and people are going to think like, picking up this book, it's intended for an audience that it's not intended for. So I like, this was the one that said, okay, I'm heated about this cover change. And it's not even just the fact that, like we can talk about issues within the community, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later in the video in terms of like, having a range of styles within a respective genre, especially like within romance, where like there are people who have legitimate concerns in terms of like seeing cover models where it's just like a disembodied chest or torso or things like that. But the way, I don't think this cover trend is the way to be able to communicate. It's like it feels like it's just it's taking you away from the conversations of what marketability is and what people want out of specific genres and have expectations of a specific genre and things like that. But we'll get into that later on in this video. Another series that I thought about in terms of things that had a redesigned cover where it has like a more cartoonish cover was Tessa Bailey's Too Hot to Handle. So I have the original book cover as it was marketed under forever. This is the original cover up for your reference, which communicates the tone of this being an adult romance, which communicates in terms of the level of steam factor and things like that. Like the tone of it does communicate what is contained in this respective book and how it was originally marketed. And then when you look at the redesigned cover, and I had to tell someone in Target this, that this was not a new book, number one, and number two, it was not YA in terms of things. I see that as a mismatch and disconnect in terms of things, like just really the tone, the stylistic, all of it feels like a significant downgrade. And then not only that, it feels like it's following this trend of clip artish, cartoonish illustrations that feel more juvenile than what the weight of the actual narrative has. So it feels like it feels like a backslide in terms of the quality of a cover in terms of how it's marketed to consumers and how it's marketed to certain audiences in terms of things. I don't get the trend of like having these generic and cartoon illustrated covers, which communicate a mismatch between what's contained in the book and what's marketed on the cover. So that's another example of where I think the mismatch is really like apparent in terms of the content and what it's attempting to sell based on the cover. Another issue that I want to talk about is that when you're purchasing a book with a specific cover and a specific format, how frustrating that can be as a consumer to not be able to retain the product that you bought. So when we're talking about the differences between buying a physical book copy, like when you're buying a physical book copy, you're getting a solid product. So for example, if you are buying, and I mentioned this in my previous video in terms of this being the original cover of Queen Move, it has since been redesigned to a more discreet cover, which I'll put up here for your reference, and I mentioned this in another video. So if you are a consumer who buys a physical product that looks like this, you know you're getting this, and you can hold on to it, and you can hold on to it as long as you want to. But when it comes to the tangibility of digital products, when it comes to redesigned covers that of long-running series or series that have been designed in the past, if it's updated, you are not like able to hold on to the product that you bought. So if the cover gets redesigned and you're basically like unable to hold on to this particular cover version, and you get updated to a cover version that you don't want, where does that land? And I've heard so many people in terms of things say, like, you know, I purchased this book series, I purchased them with the original covers digitally, like in digital format, whether it's audiobook, whether it's ebook or what have you, and all of a sudden the publisher decides, oh, we're going to change this cover, or the individual author says, I'm going to change this cover, and then your product changes. And you aren't able to hold on to that old cover, or the cover you got attached to, or the product that you got attached to. So when does that lend? And when I see this cover trend of, going into the cartoonish or the illustrated or the generic covers, people aren't allowed to opt out of that cover change. And it's frustrating because in terms of things, it's like I wanted the specific product. I'm kind of being punished for buying something that's able to update. Like the trade-off that you have is that when you buy something that's a virtual product, like, you know, it updates and changes in terms of, like, you know, according to the publisher or the individual author or what have you. But as a consumer, that's frustrating because you can't hold on to the product that you originally purchased. And some people want to opt into that. I bought this specific product with this respective cover and I want to hold on to it. I don't want the updated version of it. And that's frustrating as a consumer. So it almost is like you almost have to be able to buy the physical copy in order to be able to hold on to the thing that you want to buy. And that's not really fair to the consumer in terms of what they want to opt into or opt out of. And I've seen this multiple times before in terms of the purchase of digital products, even with the mention of J.C. Burton, when I have several books in the play-by-play series that are with the original covers that are audiobook, and knowing now that the covers of that are going to change frustrates me a little bit in terms of things, because I know they're going to go to that cartoon cover that I don't even want in my collection. And because it's juvenile, it's generic, it doesn't represent the product that I bought. And, you know, like my preference in terms of things, like, you know, like I have my preferences as an adult consumer of books in terms of things. I like being able to see a range of different covers in the romance community, it's not so much that I have an opposition to illustrated or discrete covers. Like I like it depending on the style, but when you look at that cover for The Perfect Play, I'm like, I don't want that in my collection. I would never even pick that up by choice at all. And it's frustrating because I actually really enjoyed the original covers of J.C. Burton's play-by-play series, because I think it's very distinct, because you know what you're getting into. It's indicative of sports romance. And I actually do like, being able to see, like, like the physique of the players in terms of things like for each of the different covers, because that communicates the steam factor, the maturity of it, and everything else, and it's just aesthetically pleasing to look at, I feel like. And I understand that there are people who have different preferences for things, but I don't understand how anyone could think that the quality of the cover for the original one and the redesigned one are even remotely the same, or even of the same quality. The latter one spells to me like it's much it's watered down and cheaper quality. And that's a frustrating aspect to me as a consumer in terms of stuff, because as an adult romance reader, I have a certain expectation for the level of content that I'm consuming, and for the particular, either the author or the particular steam factor or heat factor that is in certain books. I don't want to be lied to. And I don't think very many consumers want to be lied to either about the content that they're consuming. So it's frustrating it's frustrating and infuriating, to say the least. Now, this isn't an issue in terms of me saying wholesale that discrete covers or illustrated covers can't work for adult romance or any specific genre. I feel like there are nuances and quality on things that need to be kind of showcased when it comes to discussion of this, because it's not that I'm wholesale dismissing the idea of having discrete covers or illustrated ones. It depends on all four of the factors that I mentioned, as well as the quality and the tone and the synchronicity of those aspects along with the work itself. There are several examples that I could give you of discrete and illustrated covers that sell exactly what the work entails, and I'm going to show you that right now. First off, I want to highlight an older cover, and this is one of my favorite Nora Roberts covers in terms of things, and this is a very discrete cover. This is The Villa. And I think I showcased this book on the channel before when I was doing my bookshelf organization video, but this is a very strong example of a cover that is discrete, that doesn't necessarily have a disembodied person on it or anything like that, but it conveys to you exactly what it's selling. There's almost a sense of a romantic, nostalgic feel with The Villa in terms of how this is designed, and you can see like the French flap and stuff like that. I loved this particular and even on the inside of the cover, in terms you know exactly what you're getting from this romance novel based on the design of it and how elegant and beautiful and evocative it is. So please don't think that I'm wholesale dismissing the impact of discrete covers, because there are ways to do it that convey exactly what the consumer wants in terms of things, and is able to be able to appeal with and match the tone of the story that is contained inside. Another example, and this is an example of an illustrated cover, and I just mentioned this on the channel in terms of how excited I am to be able to read this one. This is Kathy Yardley's Role Playing. I knew I wanted a physical copy of this in my collection. It is an illustrated cover. It is marketed specifically towards the audience. It's very, very luxe and very well done in terms of showcasing the characters and their chemistry here. The lettering is very nice. This is something that I can say that this is an adult romance, and it's conveying exactly the tone and exactly the kind of factors that made me want to pick this particular book up. And so it's so eye-catching that I knew I wanted to pick this up, and it's the kind of cover that would make me want to read on the back of it and say, okay, what is this about? This looks really cute while also being mature. Another one that I want to say that is an illustrated cover that is really well done in terms of things, and it's like aesthetically pleasing to the eyes. This is Mia Tsai's Bitter Medicine, and this is a library copy, but you can tell this is an illustrated cover. You can tell this is an adult fiction, adult romance that conveys exactly like in terms of tonality, and is really interesting to look at and have in a collection. And I would want to buy this and pick it up and looking to see what it's about based on the cover of this. This is designed extremely well, and it's illustrated. It is the type of book that I would want to pick up as an adult romance reader. And yet another one, this is from Farah Roshan's respective series. This is The Hookup Plan. I thought that this was an appropriate cover for this as well in terms of things. You see the illustrate, like it's very distinctive in terms of the design of the characters, the lettering, and everything else. It doesn't feel generic. It's like they actually have faces and they have chemistry in terms of like what they look like. Like I think it does well for what it offers, like in terms of things, and I know what I'm picking up when I pick it up. So this is an example of an illustrated cover that I think works for what it offers, and it's very cute to see. And also Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellafour. This is well designed as well as a sapphic romance in terms of like how aesthetically pleasing it is to look at, and it's not that generic cover clip art. Like you can tell, like in terms of how scenic it is, the representation of the chemistry of the two characters here in terms of things, and it gives you exactly what to expect from this adult romance. Another Nora Roberts book. This is a generic cover as well in terms of things. This is That Summer Magic, and you can tell like it is conveying a certain tone with the beach chairs and the backdrop and the scenery here. Like this makes sense for this respective collection of stories. I believe it's 2. It's Captivated in Trance, but this does a good job of selling you while not being generic. Like it's evocative of a certain sense of symbolism that and is aesthetically pleasing to look at. So this is something that like when I saw it, I knew I wanted to pick it up and see what it was about and see what the stories were about here. So there are ways that you can do adult romance in the form of discrete covers as well as illustrated covers that convey the tone, the theme, the stylistic, the aesthetic, the symbolism, where it works in a way that doesn't feel like it's just half done. I can give you another example of a discrete cover that does very well with this evocative imagery and symbolism. This is an older cover, and this is from Harlequin. This is Tear You Apart by Megan Hart. I mentioned this on the channel before when I was going through my my bookshelf organizational video. This is a very well designed discrete cover because it conveys a lot of symbolism in terms of things. Even if you did not know that this was an adult erotic romance, there are things about it that convey the tone of it. You see the single wedding ring here, you see the apples in terms of this, and the lettering in terms of Tear You Apart. This indicates that this is a marriage in trouble. And you can look at the different symbols in terms of the context of this and be able to see, okay, what is this about? Like, and it intrigues you in terms of wanting to pick it up and say, okay, I'm curious to see what it does with respect to the themes in this respective novel. And it does it in a very like subtle but mature way without being generic. Another example and this is an older book from my collection that I've also talked about on the channel before. This is Unpredictable by Eileen Cook. You can tell that this is a rom-com based on the tone of the respective cover, from the like the shoes and the colors and like the overall designs, the raised little hearts and stars and other things here. It's such a lovely cover in terms of things, and it does not feel generic. Like, it invites you in terms of being able to say, okay, this is unpredictable, and you're wondering, okay, what does this entail? Like, what is it about? Like, and it kind of just invites you in without feeling like it's half done in terms of things. So I want to be able to be clear and say there are a range of different things that you can do with discrete covers and illustrated covers, where it invites you in. It doesn't feel like a turn off, and it doesn't feel like it's half done, and it invites you in terms of being able to say, what is this a book about? Add it to your collection, whether it's by digital or whether it's by physical means, and it doesn't feel like it's half done. But I would also make the case and to say that there is room also, like, in addition to not having like discrete and illustrated covers, like, I am absolutely for like, you know, like a range of different covers in adult romance in terms of things where you do feature couples and different types of bodies and things like that. I don't think those are out of place with respect to adult romance in terms of things. And I feel like the way that the discrete covers as well as the illustrated covers, the way that these covers are being redesigned is almost to the point where there's a sense of self-censorship that is going on, or a kind of a dumbing down in terms of like, you know, conveying heat levels within a specific story. It's almost like, you know, it would be one thing if the author decided to say, hey, like, I feel like I want to design the covers differently to convey a different thing or have different perspectives. But the way that I'm seeing like all of these different redesigns to kind of like all down the intensity and the heat levels of certain books is to the point where it's like, are we taking away from being able to show intimacy in a way like between human beings, whether it may be same-sex couples, whether it may be opposite-sex couples, whether it may be different types of couples or relationships? Are we taking away the human aspect of these different tones of covers and taking away from the conveyed, the match, how they match the stories that are contained beyond these covers? And so for me, being able to see a range of different covers that match the audience that they're intended for is important, and not having that ambiguity and that that mismatch for respective audiences is important in terms of things, because like I said before, there's a very distinct tonal difference between books that are marketed as YA versus adult. And even in the spectrum of romance, there's a difference between what you market as a YA romance versus an adult romance. And so like taking away like some of the more mature covers, as you will, where it showcases different types of bodies with different types of relationships and things like that, you're taking away from that distinction a bit, and you're taking away from that sense of creativity from people who want to say like, hey, this is the type of content that my book entails. Like, for example, when I look at a book like from Reese Ryan called Just a Little Married, I know what I'm getting from looking at the couple on the cover. I know this is not YA. I know this is about two consenting adults who are in a relationship and who are their respective relationship chronicled in this respective story and as a Black romance, and the characters are being represented as they are here. and it's a beautiful cover. Like I will probably read this on the channel at some point in terms of things. It's one of many Reese Ryan's books that I have, but you know exactly what you're getting when you see this. And like Harlequin does a really good job, and has traditionally done a really good job of their covers in terms of things. Especially like I'm bummed about the Harlequin Desire line, because they were on fleek when it came to the design of these covers, and wanting to invite you in terms of what you'll get from tone as well as content. Another book that I like really fell in love with was Anna Bennett's One Dude Down. I knew the moment that I saw this cover, adult romance, and the chemistry between these two cover models, I knew I wanted this respective series. And I knew this was the second book in this respective series, but the fact that I fell in love with this cover made me want to pick up the other book that was in this series before it, in terms of things. So you have to think about what's aesthetically pleasing to your audience, what's going to invite them in, tonally, what does the cover communicate in terms of things, and being able to draw your audience in. And I don't think this kind of chemistry would be communicated if it had been gone with a generic cover, a discreet cover, or an illustrated cover that looked like the cover for Tessa Bailey's Too Hot to Handle, or the newly designed cover for J.C. Burton's series. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Now, one alternative that I could think of in terms of things, if there are people who are really concerned in terms of how maturity of certain books is portrayed on the cover, why not go back to the Stepback method? I always say this in terms of things. It's like you have the business in the front and the party in the back. Like this, in this Victoria Alexander, The Lady in Question book, you have the cover of the front. Even though there's a kind of a mature looking image that's down here that gives you the indication that this is an adult romance, you look on the inside and you can tell that this is an adult romance also either. So I feel like if people are concerned about, like, in terms of the marketability of books, why not bring back the Stepback? The Stepback was a great way for adult romance to be able to sell for what it has. Like you have the font here, you have the image, and then you can open up and see the more mature example of the couple in question, which still invites you in terms of being able to see the chemistry between the couple and know what you're getting into. And there's no ambiguity about this being an adult romance in terms of the way that it is designed, and it still looks aesthetically pleasing. People have asked me whether or not the current trend of discreet covers, illustrated covers, has that affected my buying in terms of physical copies or even digital copies of different books. And I would say absolutely yes. Sometimes I actively avoid the illustrated covers in terms of things, because I like, for me personally, if it feels like a book doesn't match something that I want to have in my collection, I'm not going to pick it up and buy it. And I'm going to say this very distinctly, and I mean no disrespect to any of the authors or anything like that in terms of things. If I looked at a cover that looked like Too Hot to Handle in terms of a redesigned cover, I would not pick this up, because it feels too juvenile and it feels like a mismatch to the content of the story within, and it's not something that I'm likely to hold on to in my collection in terms of things, because when I pick it up, I'm like, I don't feel the connection, and I don't feel the quality of it emanating from this particular product. Like, for example, like, there are some illustrated covers that, like, I think are stunning and nice in terms of being able to look at in terms of things. But there are other times when I've looked at the illustrated cover versus the alternative cover, and I've chosen the alternative cover instead because it evoked different things from me, and it felt more like I want to add this into my collection. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this. So Helen Huang's The Quick Kiss Quotient is an example of an illustrated cover that was done very, very well. And, but it was something that I didn't necessarily gravitate towards. I wanted to read it, but I didn't necessarily gravitate towards the cover, and your mileage may vary for it, but I still think this is a nice cover. But when the mass market paperback for this came out, I knew I wanted to have it. And I think this is a lovely cover. I love the fact that the color scheme of this is really nice. The lettering is very nice. The chemistry between the couple here, and you can tell what the characters look like here, and that gave it a sense of connectivity with me that I really liked in terms of being able to add it into my collection. And I believe this is blurred by Entertainment Weekly, but this was so beautiful. I knew that I wanted to have it in my collection, and so I opted to pick it up over the original cover. Let me give you another example. So Tia Williams, who is the author of 7 Days in June, had another book out that had an illustrated cover, and I'll put that cover up for your reference, for The Perfect Find. This was the original cover for The Perfect Find. And when there was a reissue of it in, I think, the early part of the 2020s, I think it may have been 2021 or 2022. Let me look and see. 2021. Okay, so this particular cover was issued in 2021. When I saw this, I knew I wanted to have this in my collection. So I really gravitated towards the fact that there's a real woman who is standing in the backdrop of the city in terms of things, in the lettering and also the general design. I knew I wanted to have this in my collection over the original cover. Not that the original cover wasn't good. It conveyed the character very well, and it had a cute style that, I think would appeal to other people, but this spoke to me, even more in terms of things, and I knew I wanted to pick it up and add it to my physical collection, so I'm glad that I have this in my collection, and I do need to give this a proper review because this was a good book. I'm so behind on in general in terms of my review, so I'm trying to catch up in 2024. Another one. So this is talking about movie covers. So, everybody knows the original cover for Red, White, and Royal Blue. And as distinctive as that is, I still felt like it wasn't one that I wanted to add to my collection in terms of things, because it's just the aesthetic. The aesthetic matches the content to a certain extent in terms of stuff. You see the representation of the characters and what have you. But when I saw the movie cover version, I knew I wanted to have it in my collection. I could go without the Amazon Prime thing, but the way that this was done in terms of seeing the chemistry between the two leads from the movie, as well as their socks, and in terms of things, there's a lot of this that just actually works for communicating it as a romance novel and as an adult romance novel. So I knew I wanted to have this in my collection. So that's just another example of where I opted for the realistic cover over the illustrated cover. And then we get to one of the more infamous examples in terms of things. I have not made it subtle in terms of how much I hated the original cover for The Hating Game, because you have these very exaggerated illustrations of two people kind of looking at each other in terms of things in the lettering and stuff like that. And for me, it just felt like it was jumbled and messy, and I was just like, this is not aesthetically pleasing, and I don't it feels like an eyesore to me when I look at it. Now, there was another version of this illustrated cover that I thought about getting that looks like this, that I wasn't able to pick up, but I understood a little bit more, and I gravitated a little bit more towards that illustrated cover, because you can tell that these two have animosity, and it looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But I knew that over on both of those, I wanted to have the movie cover version because I can actually tell from the representation of the actors who are here and like just the overall aesthetic of this particular book that it was something that communicated the fact that it's the hating game. She looks displeased, he looks pensive, and like there's a tone here that is definitely communicated that this is an adult romance, and there's kind of like a hate to love relationship that's going on here. So this makes more sense to me, and I knew I wanted to have it in my collection, and they look nice on this cover. So yeah. There's another one that I want to mention, like in terms of things, but I don't think this was a bad cover at all in terms of things. Talia Hippert's Get a Life, Chloe Brown was a very well designed illustrated cover in terms of things, but I did gravitate towards the mass market paperback a little bit in terms of things because it, like, you know, I like being able to see the plus size model with the guy and also the cat that's right here in terms of things, and it's just really nice to look at. So that would be an example of where I could have gone either way, like in terms of either purchasing the illustrated cover or this one, because I liked the design of both of them, but I gravitated towards this one because it was easier to get it in mass market paperback, and I'm glad I have this in my collection. But it's an example of how you can do different types of covers in terms of things and still have an appeal to them and communicate to the audience in terms of who they're intended for. So all in all, I think to wrap this respective video up, I think we need to have a larger discussion about the use of discrete and illustrated covers in terms of who they're intended for and the audience that they are representing. And if you were to ask me in terms of why I think this respective trend is actually capitalizing, I don't think it's just because of what it's because of what consumers are calling for. I think there may be a combination of more insidious factors in terms of that. And when I say insidious factors, it's not meant to kind of like butt heads in terms of things like, you know, authors can do what they want to do in terms of what they feel is best for the type of tone they want to communicate with their book, as well as the audience they're marketing to and things like that. But what I'm getting of the very aggressive push of the types of covers that we're seeing in terms of the redesign, like in the play-by-play series, as well as other redesigns where these illustrated covers are being marketed, I think it's a combination of different things. I think number one, there's a lot that goes into the specific design of covers when it comes to covers that you see like this one in terms of things. Like there's multiple factors you can say, like in terms of real people involved. You have to have someone who is like the cover models who are a part of that they need to be paid. The photographer needs to be paid. The person who is designing the cover needs to be paid in terms of things. And like there's specific factors when you have covers that have a little bit more to them in terms of things that where the labor is there is more involved in terms of the actual design of the cover. And I think this trend where we see more generic clip arty, cartoonish type covers, or generic covers that don't really have much to them in terms of things. It's a way for publishers or like people who are on publishing teams to downsize and not pay the people who are designing these particular covers in terms of things. So it's a shrinking of labor and a shrinking of creativity in terms of why we're seeing a lot of these covers feel like they're being reduced in quality. And I think that's very important to be able to point out in terms of things. And it's the thing that makes me heated, because I'm like, I know you're trying to cut corners. That's why you're doing these changes, and that needs to stop immediately. Like, you need to actually care about the marketing of your product, and that means investing in the labor that goes beyond into the marketing of these books and how to promote them. So I think that's something that I want to say, like in terms of how important that is. The other part of it is also, I think, a brand, in some ways it feels like a brand of self-censorship as well, especially for covers that communicate more heat and steam and things like that. So when we're talking about stuff like adult romance in terms of things, we have like different levels of heat that are communicated across. Like there are what are considered to be clean romances, which I don't really like that term. I prefer, like, if you're going to label it, you can have no heat, low heat, and go from there in terms of things, because I think it's less judgmental. But when it comes to like specific romances, like, there are different tones that exist in adult romance in terms of things, and you want to make sure that's clearly communicated to the audience that it's provided for, because you don't want to have a tonal mismatch with respect to the adult for the adult community. Because if you have something that's a little bit cleaner, and let me see if I can have an example. Let's say, for example, Harlequin has the Harlequin romance line, which is a little bit more like in terms of the softer side and a lower heat. Like, this still communicates a real person, and it communicates it's an adult romance novel, but like, this is representative of something that doesn't communicate a lot of heat, but it still looks attractive, and the model is attractive, and things like that. So, like, I feel like there are ways that you can do cover designs that communicate tone, and being able to accommodate for that tone in terms of things while it conveys what your book is about. And I feel like there's room for everyone at the table to be able to have that showcase with respect to their respective covers and things like that. I don't like this active censorship of, and it feels like active censorship of, more higher heat communications, like in terms of the covers for adult romance, because of this sense of wanting to censor or downsize in terms of things. And I know there are some people who have preferences in terms of things that say, like, you know, I prefer, like, you know, the covers to be more discreet. I prefer the covers to be lower heat in terms of things. But I would argue that taking away some of those higher heat covers is going to create a mismatch of its respective target audience. Like, if you're, let's say, like, you're like a reader who is looking for things that have lower heat or no heat or what have you, it would make more sense for you to gravitate towards like no heat, lower heat covers that communicate the story that you want to read. And if it's higher heat, like, if you, like, it doesn't make sense to have a low heat cover with a high heat type book, because it's a mismatch, and you may not want to have that higher heat story to read, because it's not the type of story that you want to read. And I think that's important to be able to establish, because you want to make sure things match in terms of, like, so that you're getting the story that you want to get in terms of things. The other part of it would be, like, another solution would be to have alternative covers in terms of things. And, like, if you have a special run edition of something that's a little bit, like, either steamier or on the lower part of the heat level, like, have special edition covers, but don't completely discontinue the cover that it was originally marketed as. Like, for example, can you imagine what the kind of blowback would be if you took a Robert Jordan book in terms of this, and this is I love these editions for this respective cover. Can you imagine the kind of backlash that would result if this kind of cover was discontinued and it was replaced with something that looked like Too Hot to Handle, or the Perfect Play in terms of things, in terms of the cartoonish cover? That kind of indicates the level of sexism in terms of things as well, in terms of things, because if that happened to this, there would be blowback and they would be forced to change it back. But yet, so many of us in the adult romance community who are speaking out about this kind of things are just basically falling on deaf ears about it in terms of things. I think there should be an accurate range to reflecting the type of stories that are being told and being accommodating to that range. I feel that is very important in terms of the bookish community, in terms of things. And I want that I want people to be able to feel like they can market the types of stories that they want to market and have the heat levels that they want to have, and have a range of being able to showcase that and market it to their audience, rather than being forced to consume a specific image just because it's a trend. Yeah, I'm heated about it in terms of things, but I feel that's important, to be able to showcase a range and being open and being honest about the type of content that we're marketing in terms of stuff and who it's intended for. I think that's the best way for me to sum it up and also to conclude this video on. There are other things that I could also say that factor into the decisions of like publishers of being able to market this respective thing. It's labor, it's degree of expressionality, it's like it's a lot of different things in terms of things, and I just touched on them basically for this one video, but it could go easily into another video in terms of topics, in terms of things. And like I said before, this is just one video of probably even more than one that I'm going to do on this as more aspects of this come into place. But I feel like it is an issue that we're seeing a lot of Discreet and a lot of illustrated covers that provide this mismatch between different communities and different age groups in terms of content and bookish content that we need to pay attention to and understand that, you know, we can't lose sight of the ball in terms of things, because it's going to impact not just the community at large in terms of things. Like, I foresee, like, if this continues to be unaddressed and not pushed back against, I feel like it's going to derail in terms of like having more issues with respect to total mismatch for like the different communities. People are going to pull back in terms of what they purchase in terms of things, because they can't trust what's marketed to them. And then that's going to have an impact in terms of the marketability of different authors and illustrators and things like that. So I think this is a really important topic to be able to keep our finger on the pulse for in terms of things. But that's my rant, my thoughts on the illustrated Discreet covers conversation, one of many. Please let me know your thoughts in terms of this respective topic. If it's something that like you like, just feel free to share your thoughts in terms of this larger issue in terms of things. And then based on responses, based on other community feedback in terms of things, I'm glad to add on and make more videos on this to be able to expand the topic further. But thank you for watching. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching and hearing my thoughts and hearing my spiel in terms of things and being able to see my examples. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be informed of when I post new videos. Thank you so much again for watching. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.